First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers and Prashant for inviting me to this talk. I think I'll quickly review the data. There are some very specific recommendations, and in a really small subset of mutations. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll see what are tyrosine kinases, we'll see what are driver mutations, see how do you target driver mutations. Then we'll talk about adjuvant TKIs, we'll talk about non-adjuvant TKIs, and finally we'll just sum it up with one or two slides, I think, which are the most important slides in the talk. Okay. Tyrosine kinases are basically enzymes which phosphorylate tyrosine residues. They change the conformation of protein, activate proteins, and they give a lot of, they start a lot of events after that, which ultimately lead to the malignant phenotype. They usually activate the tyrosine kinase receptor, or they could be non-receptor tyrosine kinases, but the mutation usually activates these enzymes. And there are inhibitors which can switch off the enzymes and control the cell growth, and which is exactly what a tyrosine kinase inhibitor is. All small molecules are not tyrosine kinase because all the enzymes are not tyrosine kinase. There are some serine kinases also, and these are two groups. But essentially, when we use a general purpose TKI, we mean everything. But it need not inhibit tyrosine kinase. Like BRAF is actually serine kinase, but the general word TKI is used for all these drugs which inhibit kinases. Okay, the T should be, because bulk of the kinases are tyrosine kinases. Okay, this is the thing. Usually the receptor consists of two parts. They come together when the growth factor binds. Then it starts a whole lot of this blue are the second, the translation pathways. And finally, the metastasis, angiogenesis, cell proliferation, which are known, which are the features of malignant disease that start. TKIs are the ones which inhibit the first step. That means the receptor to next step they inhibit. Then what's a driver mutation? Essentially, driver mutation is a mutation which drives the cancer. I mean, that's the best way to remember it. And this is a definition according to NCI. But driver mutations have had a big impact on oncology. I mean, specifically, if you ask me, of course, CML we know. ALK has had a very good effect on, and EGFR we know because EGFR is more common. But in terms of impact, ALK has had a much bigger impact. NSCLC has a lot of driver mutations. Many are targetable. This is the latest, and every 6 months this changes because more mutations come in. You know that unknown part, which is 24%, is shrinking. I mean, if you had done something like this at about 10 years ago, unknown may have been as high as 50%. But as more have been discussed, the unknown is shrinking. So we are looking at EGFR, we are looking at ALK in this talk. Otherwise, we are looking at MET, we are looking at ROS, we are looking at BRAF and RET and all that. But for this talk, we are looking at only 2 mutations, EGFR typical mutations, which are essentially 2 mutations, exon 19, exon 21. Okay, when you talk about lung cancer, small cell lung cancer has mutations, driver mutations, they are not targetable. TP53, MYC, PI3K, these are not targetable. Squamous has targetable mutations, but the percentage is very small. And the bulk of the targetable mutations are in non-squamous histology. So small cell carcinoma, we don't use TKI. So we did that. In squamous cell carcinoma, in metastatic setting, there is an indication of using TKIs, but because the mutations are uncommon, these patients are usually excluded from trials and data is limited. So whether we, in operable patients, whether we do, the questions open. Probably we don't. The guidelines, probably all of them, the trials are all non-squamous. So what we're talking we should apply to non-squamous only. These are the mutations and these are drugs. I'm just to give you the number of drugs which are available today, and the number is increasing. And today we'll be talking about 2 mutations and 3 drugs. Erlotinib, osimertinib, alectinib. These are 3 drugs which are used in adjuvant setting and neoadjuvant setting. What is neoadjuvant? Neoadjuvant is before any treatment which is used before the definitive treatment, which can be almost always surgery, but for things like even it could be radiation also, is called neoadjuvant. The idea is to shrink the disease, and idea is to take care of micrometastases, which are the ones which are responsible for treatment failure. Adjuvant is any treatment which is given after definitive treatment. And metastatic, I mean, the aim is to take care of micrometastasis. Metastatic is given in inoperative patients. The aim is palliation, prolongation. So we are looking at the first 2, not the third one here. in adjuvant setting, in case of EGFR, the use of adjuvant therapy is well established. In case of ALK, there is enough data, there is data to show, and other mutations, the trials are going on. Neoadjuvant setting, though there are trials for responses, the place is not really established. To discuss the adjuvant TKI use in NSCLC, there are 4 trials which basically we are looking at. The ADAURA trial was osimertinib, RADIANT and SELECT were erlotinib, and adjuvant was geftinib. Adjuvant compared is the only one which compared a TKI against chemotherapy, and it showed that TKI is better. But geftinib we are not using, so that the value of the trial right now is limited. The other RADIANT and SELECT were trials for erlotinib. RADIANT was phase 3 trial. They used immunohistochemistry for detecting EGFR mutation. That is not a standard way. And for the entire group, the trial was a negative trial. But when you took a subset of mutated patients, which is the way we today assess EGFR, when you took a subset of mutated patients, the trial was a positive trial. SELECT is a phase 2 trial, no comparator, but it has given very good responses at 2-year DFS of 88%. And you can see that, okay? Both these trials used erlotinib 150 mg OD. I am emphasizing this because though it is not the best of treatment, it is the only treatment available to bulk of our patients. That's the reason I am emphasizing erlotinib again and again. It's not the best treatment. If cost were not a constraint, erlotinib is not the choice. But unfortunately, osimertinib being patented is expensive, and to take it for 3 years is very expensive. I don't think there are many patients in this country who can afford it. But if affordable is not an issue, osimertinib gives you almost a 80% benefit in disease-free survival and about 82% benefit in CNS disease-free survival. That's the efficacy. So the difference between these two is that osimertinib improves OS and DFS, and the first generation TKIs only improved DFS. So we believe that some DFS may translate into benefit. We believe some benefit is better than others. So erlotinib should be used, but the choice remains osimertinib, if cost is not a constraint. Because somebody asked the issue of, we are working in public institution, and that is a challenge then. Neoadjuvant TKIs use, there are trials showing good responses. There's some data showing these are patients, most of the trials have less than 100 patients today. But what you can see is that they are getting good responses. There's survival which are 33 months, 11 months, 35 months. But the important thing to know is that neoadjuvant use of TKIs in lung cancer, in operative lung cancer, is a thing which is under investigation. And that's something probably one should not do. So I think these are the 3 most important slides of the entire talk. Okay, they're very, very congested, crowded, but the choice was between comprehensiveness and simplicity, so I have opted for comprehensiveness. So clinical settings, there are 4 clinical settings where we use these, we use TKIs in operable lung cancer. And the first one is completely resected R0, 1B to 3A, and EGFR 19 and EGFR 21 mutation. If you're having a mutation outside these mutations, then I don't think this discussion applies. Because the SELECT trial, I think the SELECT trial had about 3 patients which were outside, over 100. Okay? And the option is osimertinib 80 mg per day for 3 years, 80% reduction in relapse rates and 82% reduction in CNS relapses. Erlotinib is the other option. If you don't have access, or if you can't, osimertinib is not an option, then erlotinib is the option. The important thing also to remember is that if you have, there are people who have EGFR positive and PDL1 positive. Both cannot be used. When you use the sequence PDL1 and osimertinib, the lung toxicity goes up dramatically. So this is one condition where you don't use both, and if the PDL levels are more than 1% with EGFR mutation, you use the EGFR drug, not the PDL1. Superior sulcus tumors, the data is indirect. If they get operable after chemo radiation, surgery and chemotherapy if given, you use osimertinib. And finally, for ALK positive tumors who are more than 4 centimeters who involve lymph nodes, use alectinib 600 mg twice a day for 2 years. You expect a benefit of PFS is 76% and CNS progression benefit of 78%. So I think this summarizes what's the current practices of TKI in operable lung cancer. I think that's...
Great, thanks. Thanks a lot. Yeah, so Vivek, if you can open the session for Q&A.
Yeah, hello, pretty comprehensive presentation, sir. Most of my questions are already answered because I already had a question key why the the immunotherapy trials had excluded EGFR positive patients. But what if the EGFR positive patients are given immunotherapy? Does it work or has it been tried?
The other sequence seems to be safe, but I don't know why would one use it. I mean, you'd try to exhaust. If you're giving, EGFR osimertinib, yeah, then that works out. But I don't know why would you do it. That's the problem.
And just as an icon. And secondly,
it could be you could say that if you relapse after 1 year, what will you do? Possibly use immunotherapy.
Okay. Anyways, we'll have to re-biopsy and then the cascade starts again. And another question was, have you ever come across a situation where we have to give TKI on humanitarian grounds where the patient doesn't have money, but it's a female, non-smoker, adenocarcinoma, and you have to give something to her, and you cannot tolerate any conventional chemotherapy?
Actually, in practice, I have given without even fish in these patients. I had diagnosis severely symptomatic patients. I given the drug. In 7 days, she responded. By the time report came, it's been done. And these were early days. That time they used to do fish, and the reports used to take forever to come. But I have done that. And this lady went home. I'm going to the village. I said, take this and go home. And I gave Geflinib. She responded.
And would you recommend it with in today's time? Would you? Today's
scenario, at least get a fish for EGFR. Again, I'm telling you, in this country, practice-wise, even ALK is out of reach.
Yes.
Because NATCO has gone. I mean, these guys have gone into litigation in NATCO, and NATCO stopped manufacturing the drug they had. So, for most people in this country, the only option in TKI is Geflinib or erlotinib or afatinib now. It's available. Okay. And if you're going to go that way, then do a fish for EGFR. Why do you want to complicate things?
Right.
And so financially considering, do you recommend alectinib or a crizotinib for ALK positive patients?
ALK positive alectinib.
Alectinib only,
okay. Any questions, comments from the audience for Dr. Ria? Any comments? So Avinash, can you just, you said you did a comprehensive slide, but in a simple manner. So what's your take? I mean, how do you decide post-operatively somebody's gone for a surgery with a curative intent and is EGFR positive?
See, I think what will happen in most situations is that they will not go for osimertinib. That's the problem. Because we go for erlotinib and for whatever. I mean, at least the question may be asked that why not chemotherapy? So the answer is indirect. If Geflinib is better than chemotherapy, okay, but that chemotherapy was vinorelbine and cisplatin, which is not the best. Okay, and in metastasis setting, we know that these drugs are better than chemotherapy. So I suppose one would choose an EGFR even if it's erlotinib or chemotherapy, but the answer is indirect. There's no direct answer.
Okay, great, thanks. So the chances of recurrence after surgery, suppose you have two arms, one gets erlotinib, other one doesn't get erlotinib. We don't talk about osimertinib.
Yeah.
So what's the chance of recurrence?
That's coming out. There's about 39% reduction in recurrence.
39% reduction in recurrence.
That's what's coming to.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Nikhil, sorry, Nikhil, please.
Hi, my question to Ria.
Yes,
like evolvement of immunotherapy, it was observed that those patients who develop lung cancer and on treatment, those who contracted the infection, they have a longer survival, contrary to those who didn't. So this is how the immunotherapy was evolved. So does there is any data or is there any support that patients who develop infection who are on immunotherapy have prolonged survival?
in fact, patients who were patients receiving immunotherapy and the squamous cell carcinoma group, they were more prone to getting post-obstructive pneumonias because of the nature of centrally located tumors. And another study showed that because of the T cell upregulation, there were more chances of these patients getting a CMV reactivation and that leading to iris. So there are no studies as of now showing that patients on immunotherapy getting infection have a better survival.
Okay, because it was in other way around. It evolved like that way.
Okay.
As a question again to her, is there any, because there are multiple factors which can, cause pneumonitis, is there any risk stratification score or predictor of post-ICI pneumonitis?
No.
No,
I think we have
anybody who can answer. Because there are a lot of factors, it gets confusing. For a surgeon, it's going to be, after 4 factors, I'm done.
If the patient is having a pre-existing autoimmune condition and if you're trying to give the immunotherapy, so suppose those patients don't have an active autoimmune disease like RA or something, previously RA was there, this patient may be at risk of developing pneumonitis. That's the only thing, but I don't think there's any other way of finding that this patient will be predisposed to a pneumonitis. Yeah.
I think we just need to cover extensively in the history as of now.
So, thanks a lot. Thank you very much.